We are going to be sewing the curves for the Starry Picnic quilt today, and you know that that is my favorite part. There are two size curves in the Starry Picnic quilt. There is a large curve in the large star block and a slightly smaller curve in the small star block, but both are quarter circle blocks and go together in the same way. So today in the tutorial, we're going to talk about pinning, sewing, and trimming these quarter circle blocks for the quilt. There is a larger curve that you will find in the large star block, and there is a smaller curve in the smaller star block. And here you can see how those compare. Our large star curve will be cut with templates A and B, and our small star curve will be cut with templates C and D. If you haven't worked with templates before, you can head back to the blog post and there will be a link to a tutorial for how to, some of the different materials you can use and then how to cut them out and use them to cut your fabric. And once you have your fabric cut, you'll be ready to sew these curves. The small star and the large star go together the same way. The only difference is that the small curve requires a little bit more patience and a little bit more fabric moving as you're sewing. I'm going to show you the large curve as an example, only because it's easier to see what I'm doing on a video. So we are going to start by folding our quarter circle fabric in half. We line up the straight edges and finger press to mark the center of the curve. And then we take our background fabric and we line up our short straight sides and we finger press to mark the center of that curve. Then we take our two pieces of fabric, we place them right sides together, lining up that crease, and then we pin. And then we're going to take the short straight side of our background fabric and line it up with the long straight side of the quarter circle fabric. And we are going to pin all along that edge. Your curve will be more accurate if these two edges stay lined up the entire time you're sewing the curve. So I pin all the way across there to keep it steady, and I leave that pin in as long as possible while I'm sewing. We want to do the same thing at the top of the curve. You can choose to put a pin here or not. I usually take it over to my sewing machine and get it under the needle without the pin. But if you want to do a pin, it would look like that. So we're going to take this and sew it. The first thing we're going to do is make sure that our short straight edge of our background fabric is lined up with the long straight edge of our star fabric. And then we're just going to put it under the foot. I usually take just a few stitches before I pause and line up my fabric. I'm going to line up my fabric to make sure that this edge of the star fabric and the edge of this pink background fabric are aligned, and then I'm going to sew with my 1/4 inch seam allowance. So there's usually extra fabric over here to the side of your sewing machine foot, but we're really only worried about extra fabric and bunches at the needle. And I have one that's going to happen. So I am going to lift my foot and I'm going to move some of this fabric back behind my needle, and then I'm going to set it back down, and you can see that the extra fabric is now over here and it's not right at my sewing machine foot. I like the center pin because I can take that out and pause to line up this second half of the curve. Again, we're going to line up this pink background fabric with the navy star fabric and then continue sewing. I'm going to have another bunch right here. So I'm going to lift my foot and move my fabric and then set it back down. I'm leaving this needle in as long as possible to make sure that the straight edges of my fabric line up at the end of the curve. And there it is. Okay, so we've sewn our curve. I have chosen to press my curve in toward the star fabric, and now we're going to trim it. The large star blocks are going to be an unfinished size of 4 inches by 4 inches. Generally, it's a good place to start to line up your block on your mat to lose the least amount of this inside piece as possible. With these blocks, we are also looking to have a 1/4 inch of fabric at the top of the curve and a 1/4 inch of fabric at the bottom of the curve. So once we trim, that'll look like this. And that is the fabric that's going to be the seam allowance when we sew our block together. So having a 1/4 inch will make it easier for the block to go together. It's also important, however, that your block fill the entire 4 inches by 4 inches. And with this block, my edges must not have been straight as I came around the edge of the curve. And so this goes up and off at an angle. So to make sure that I have a complete 4 inches, I'm gonna have to move my block in a little bit. I will be losing some of that star fabric, and that's okay. But I'm gonna try to make sure that I also have my 1/4 inches, remaining. All right, so then I'm going to line up my ruler, and that's not quite right yet. Hang on a second. I'm going to line up my ruler and trim off that edge. I'm going to line up here. And then, because I did need to move my block in, I will also need to trim that 1/4 circle fabric. And there it is, and it's ready to be sewn into our star block. If you are consistently ending up with more than a 1/4 inch at the top and the bottom of your curve, then you might want to be sewing your curves with a scant 1/4 inch seam. Another option, if you've already sewn them, is to press this seam open instead of in, and then you will lose less of this curve in the fold. If you consistently have less than a 1/4 inch there, you can always bring it in and trim some of this star fabric like I just did, but also you could increase your seam allowance that you're sewing with as well. All right, so if you have any questions or concerns, you can always reach out and find me through email or on Instagram.